Um, um, okay, we'll start with the Mangalacharan. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalaakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruye Namah Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapatantikam Vandeyam Sri Guru Sri Yuddhapadakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamsya Sri Rupam Sagarjadam Sagana Raghunathan Tamsa Jivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Paljana Setam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Sri Vishakanitamsya He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpati Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम हरे हरे ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय Hare Krishna. So we'll continue with our small book reading session. The book is titled Beyond Birth and Death. So now we are in chapter 2. We have just started this chapter. It's titled Elevation After Death. So in the previous session, we have seen the subject matter. If in this chapter, it is quite closely related to chapter 8 of the Bhagavad Gita. So uh, just like most of the chapters in the Gita, uh, even chapter 8, it starts with Arjuna's questions. He asks about six specific subject matters, and he also adds another question about how your devotees can actually remember you at the time of death. So the Supreme Lord answers those questions, and in 8.5, he specifically says, uh, uh, he specifies regarding what is the destination of those devotees who remember him at the time of death. So in the previous session, we saw the first section of this chapter. So it is very closely related to the subject matters discussed in chapter 8 of the Gita. It is chapter 8 of the Gita is titled Akshara Brahma Yoga, or Attaining the Supreme. So there are a lot of important verses in that chapter regarding um, how one can remember the Supreme Lord at the time of death, and why it is so important to remember him, and how uh, the practice of Krishna consciousness ensures that we are able to remember him at the time of death. So today we'll continue with this with the second part. We ended in this we ended with this paragraph, the last session. So in this paragraph, it is about how uh, the yogis in the other systems of yoga, they are uh, they are always focused on attaining other planetary systems, like the higher planets from this middle earth planet. But in this paragraph, Srila Prabhupada explains that uh, uh, the so-called mystic yoga processes to attain the other higher planets are still a completely futile exercise, because first of all, those who are in this middle earth planet, we are not meant to um, we are not actually meant to be roaming in those higher planets. And all the 14 planetary systems, which are divided into the 3 divisions, all these are places of misery within the material universe. So only Bhakti Yoga could help us to completely liberate ourselves from this entire material universe. So uh, those who are into the practice of other yoga systems apart from Bhakti Yoga, they can only uh, try to attain all the other planets still within this material universe, and it is only a futile exercise because it does not help to uh, liberate us from our real problems. So only Bhakti Yoga is could guarantee the permanent solution to all our problems, because even in chapter 6 of the Gita, which is titled Dhyana Yoga, so throughout the chapter, Lord Krishna talks about Dhyana Yoga, about how one should practice Dhyana Yoga, in how to practice meditation, how to go to a clean place and practice celibacy by um, sitting up straight. So all these processes of Dhyana Yoga are explained in chapter 6. But towards the end of the chapter, Arjuna himself says that this uh, system of yoga practice is, it sounds to be very impractical, mainly because it is very difficult to control the mind. So towards the end of the chapter, um, Lord Krishna concludes that, especially in the last verse of chapter 6 of the Gita, in 6.47, he says, Yogina api sarvesham matgatenam taratmana shraddhavan bhajate yomam samyuktamo matah. So, though the chapter is titled Dhyana Yoga, Lord Krishna concludes the chapter by saying that Bhakti Yoga is the topmost yoga system. So, all the other yoga systems, they are not only impractical, but they do not guarantee permanent solutions to our problems. But Bhakti Yoga is more simplified, uh, and still it provides the real solutions to our problems. uh, so in Gita 2.20, in this verse, na jayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavitava na bhuyah ajo nitya shashvatayam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire. For the soul there is never birth nor death, nor once having been, nor does he ever cease to be. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing, undying, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. So this verse appears in the uh, earliest section of the Gita. As we know, from starting from verse 2.11 to 2.30, the focus is actually on the distinction between the spirit soul and the material body. So in this part, Lord Krishna is still uh, explaining about the distinct qualities of the spirit soul compared to the material body. So in 2.20, um, apart from 2.20, there are also other verses like 2.13 and also 2.22, which talk about the uh, key differences between the spirit soul and the material body. So in 2.20, uh, the important characteristics like how the soul is unborn, eternal, ever existing, and primeval. So that's whenever we define the soul according to this definition, there's always a confusion uh, or misconception, even especially among the so-called atheists, who say that, okay, if you say that the soul is unborn, how do you explain the world population, uh, uh, which keeps increasing? So they try to argue in that way, uh, to kind of refute the conception of the spirit soul. But what they fail to understand is that the soul, it gets to transmigrate between different material bodies. So if the human population on Earth is increasing, it simply shows that more souls are getting to uh, be accommodated in the human form of life. So that's it. As Srila Prabhupada he often uses this analogy of apartments. So the 84 lakh species of material bodies, they are regarded as apartments in which the spirit souls can reside, especially the conditioned souls. The conditioned souls are allowed to reside in these 84 lakh apartments. So if the number of uh, human beings in the planet, if it increases, it simply shows that more apartments are being created. It doesn't mean that more souls are being created. So due to their ignorance, those so-called atheists or so-called rationalists, they do not even understand the fundamentals, but they try to kind of refute the conception of the spirit soul. Also, if we see from verse 2.13, Deinospin yata dehi kaumaram yavanam jara, tata deyantra pratir dhirastatra namuhyati. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. So it is not just the transmigration of the soul from one body to another, even while being within one particular body. So we, the spirit souls who have attained this human material body, we actually had this. Our apartment was was different when we were born. Meaning, when this apartment was actually constructed during the early stage of our life, but now it is looking different, and in due course of time, it keeps changing. So even this one single apartment, it keeps changing even while the spirit soul is residing in the same apartment. So at the time of death, the spirit soul leaves this current apartment and it will enter another apartment. So if the human population keeps increasing in this planet, it simply means that more apartments are being created. It doesn't mean that more souls are being born. There is no birth or death for the spirit soul. It is just that if more human beings are being born, it means that uh, more of the human material bodies are being created. More of such apartments are being created. But unfortunately, those so-called atheists who understand the fact that the human population is rising, has been rising, so they fail to realize the fact that uh, the Supreme Lord has been merciful enough to actually award us with this precious opportunity to be engaged in spiritual inquiry and devotional service. So, if the human population on earth is rising, it simply means that more and more conditioned souls are being given the opportunity, the wonderful opportunity to be engaged in spiritual inquiry and devotional service. But unfortunately, a lot of people are only proving that they are not worthy of this wonderful opportunity. So another verse from the Gita is verse 2.22. Vasam si jirnani yata vihaya navani grinati naro parani yata sharirani vihaya jirnani anyani samyati navani dehi. As a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, the soul similarly accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. So this is another analogy which is used to describe the difference between the spirit soul and the material body. So again, it is only the material body which keeps changing due to the transmigration of the soul. The soul keeps getting different material bodies. Like even now, we have attained this particular body after transmigrating over the 84 lakh species. So whether we want to uh, go back to some degraded form or whether we want to regain our original transcendental body, it all depends on what we do now. So it is the opportunity is given to everyone because the Supreme Lord, as Paramatma, he accompanies everyone in in their hearts. So there's also this misconception that just because the Supreme Lord says that he is specifically favorable to his devotees, so some so-called atheists, they might say that then why is he discriminating? No, it is not like that, because the Supreme Lord is also present as the Paramatma in even in the hearts of those so-called atheists, but they fail to realize that, and as a result, they are wasting this precious opportunity that has been given to them. Um, and as the Supreme Lord has also mentioned in other parts of the Gita, he never interferes in the individual freedom of all living entities, and therefore he accompanies everyone as the Paramatma, and he acts as the uh, overseer and permitter. He observes our activities and he awards us accordingly. So those who do not uh, wish to acknowledge the existence of God, they are free to do whatever they want. The Supreme Lord will not interfere in their decision, but uh, based on their current activities, their their next body will be decided based on their current activities at present. We are spirit soul, and as such, we are eternal. Why then should we subject ourselves to birth and death? One who asks this question is to be considered intelligent. So if we look at these four problems of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi, as the Supreme Lord himself says in chapter 13 of the Gita, especially in verse 13.9, it is actually part of the series of verses from 13.8 to 13.12. In those verses, the Supreme Lord talks about 20 aspects which are to be regarded as true knowledge. So in those verses, he defines about what is to be considered as knowledge. So he talks about 20 aspects that are related to knowledge. Out of those 20 aspects, one is, as mentioned in 13.9, Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi Dukkha Doshanu Darshanam. So a person who is truly intelligent, a person who is truly knowledgeable, he would be able to perceive the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease. So such a person will be able to actually realize that we are stuck in this evil cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. So all our problems start due to this birth, death, old age, and disease. So it all starts from birth, and even after death, if we do not regain our original transcendental body, we are likely to end up in another material body, and then the same evil cycle continues. And even between these two milestones of birth and death, Jara and Vyadi will always make us suffer every moment, because from the moment we are born, we keep aging, and the and Vyadi also accompanies us throughout the entire process. So these sufferings are there, and there's also the suffering due to the threefold miseries of Adhyatmic, Aldevik, and Adibautik. So all these sufferings put together, they make this place Dukalayam, and therefore we as spirit souls, as long as we fail to realize our true identity, as long as we are obsessed with all sorts of material designations, then there's no chance for us to even realize that we are actually suffering. So those who often regard spirituality as a waste of time, those who are always obsessed with the accumulation of material wealth, so those people are still yet to realize that they are actually suffering. So they are only in the race of uh, the race with animals like cats and dogs. They are in the race with animals in the business of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. So only someone who inquires about why am I being stuck in this endless cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease, only one who inquires about this is regarded as intelligent. Those who are Krishna conscious are very intelligent because they are not interested in gaining entrance to any planet where there is death. So as we saw in the previous session, um, in the other yoga systems, those mystic yogis who gain the capability to travel between planets, so they will still be stuck within the same material universe. It has also been stated by the Supreme Lord in uh, the Gita, especially in verses 9.20 and 9.21, about how even the those who are even those who practice the fruitive activities in the karma kanda portions of the Vedic literature, even those people can only go to heaven uh, due to the piety which was accumulated. They can go to heaven, enjoy there until their accumulated piety expires, and still they have to return to this middle earth planet. So anything which does not help us, uh, which does not help to liberate us from our real problems, is to be regarded as a waste of time. So only through bhakti yoga we can completely liberate ourselves from this entire material creation to attain the spiritual world where there is no death. They will reject a long duration of life in order to attain a body like God's. So even when we talk about the duration of life, we know that within this material universe, in the 14 planetary systems, um, above the middle planet, in the planets of the demigods, they have a different calendar. It is like 1 year of the demigods is roughly equivalent to 360 years of our Earth years, and even the calendar of Brahma is, though it is much longer compared to ours, still even Brahma has to die after living for 100 years according to his calendar. So that is about 300 trillion years, though Brahma gets to live for up to 300 trillion years based on our uh, calculation, still he has to die even after that period of time. So this material creation is subject to the influence of time, and that is what actually makes it even worse. In addition to all sorts of miseries that we have to experience, the influence of time is what actually makes us to be entangled within this endless cycle. But contrary to this Dukalayam, the spiritual world is completely free from the influence of time, and therefore everything exists there eternally. So that is the only solution for our problems in order to completely liberate ourselves from this cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease, we have to be engaged in Bhakti Yoga because that is the most suitable system for us, especially the Kali Jivas who do not have much time. Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha. Sat means eternal, Chit means full of knowledge, and Ananda means full of pleasure. Krishna is the reservoir of all pleasure. If we transfer ourselves from this body into the spiritual world, either to Krishna Loka, Krishna's planet, or any other spiritual planet, we will receive a similar Sachidananda body. Thus, the aim of those who are in Krishna consciousness is different from those who are trying to promote themselves to higher planets within this material world. So, only in Krishna consciousness, the focus is always on Bhakti Yoga to attain the spiritual world. In the other types of yoga systems, it is all based on how the mystic yogis can actually attain the higher planets, but still they are going to be stuck within this material world. So, since we do not have much time as Kali Jivas, our time is so limited, so it is really not worth venturing into all those different yoga systems, which are surely not guaranteed to provide permanent solutions to our problems. Only Bhakti Yoga has the permanent solutions to our problem by elevating us to the spiritual world. So even regarding the types of liberation, there are actually 5 types of liberation like Sarupya, Salokya. So in Sarupya Mukti, the liberated souls attain a body that is similar to the Supreme Lord. So the residents of the Vaikuntha planets, even they, once they reach that, they also get the 400 form, which is very similar to the form of Lord Vishnu. So it has also been stated by the Supreme Lord, especially in verse 8.5 of the Gita. Antakale chamameva smaran muktva kalevaram ya prayati samad bhavam yati nashtyatra samshayaha. And whoever at the end of his life quits his body remembering me alone at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. So the exact word used here is mad bhavam, my nature. So we can attain, not only do we attain the spiritual world, we also attain the quality that is similar to Supreme Lord, namely the qualities of Satchit Ananda. But it is to remember that we as fragments of the Supreme Lord, we only have qualitative similarity with the Supreme Lord. Thus, the aim of those who are in Krishna consciousness is different from those who are trying to promote themselves to higher planets within this material world. So, again, this is why the system of Krishna consciousness is different from all other yoga systems, because the goal is very clear. It is the spiritual world, and since the goal is very clear and it is completely based on how we can solve our problems, how we can completely liberate ourselves from the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. The self or soul of the individual is a minute spiritual spark. The perfection of yoga lies in the transferal of this spiritual spark to the top of the head. Having attained this, the yogi can transfer himself to any planet in the material world according to his desire. So this is referring to the mystic yoga system. If the yogi is curious to know what the moon is like, he can transfer himself there. Or if he is interested in higher planets, he can transfer himself there, just as travelers go to New York, Canada, or other cities on the earth. Wherever one goes on earth, he finds the same visa and customs systems operating, and on all the material planets, one can similarly see the principles of birth, old age, disease, and death operating. So the Supreme Lord has specifically mentioned this in 8.16, Gita 8.16, after mentioning about Dukkalayam Ashashvatam in 8.15. He says in 8.16, A Brahma Bhuvana Loka. So up to the planet of Satyaloka, the abode of Lord Brahma, the problems of birth, death, old age, and disease are always there. So any yogi, any mystic yogi who is focused on attaining all the different planets, uh, the Supreme Lord is kind enough to award those yogis. But what they must understand is that, as the Supreme Lord himself has made it very clear, no matter to which planet they go within the material universe, they will still be subject to the same problems of birth, death, old age, and disease. So that's why, after talking about uh, Dukkalayam in 8.15 and a few verses, a few of the following verses, in chapter 13, he has made it very clear that the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease is one of the important signs of knowledge. A person who is truly knowledgeable should be able to perceive the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease. So those mystic yogis who are so curious to travel to all the different planets, if they are going to waste their time, uh, though they may be so hardworking, but they are clearly not very intelligent, because they are simply wasting their time by completely disregarding their real problems. Om iti ekaksharam Brahma. At the point of death, the yogi can pronounce Om, Omkara, the concise form of transcendental sound vibration. If the yogi can vibrate this sound and at the same time remember Krishna or Vishnu, Ma Manusmaran, he attains the highest goal. It is the process of yoga to concentrate the mind on Vishnu. The impersonalists imagine some form of the Supreme Lord, but the personalists do not imagine this, they actually see. Whether one imagines him or actually sees him, one has to concentrate his mind on the personal form of Krishna. So, in chapter 12 of the Gita, titled Bhakti Yoga, in the first verse itself, Arjuna asks the Supreme Lord, uh, which is the topmost form of worship. Uh, is it worshipping your impersonal form, or is it better to worship your personal form? To which the Supreme Lord clearly answers in 12.2 that uh, it is better to worship my personal form as Krishna. So even in that chapter, in the second verse of chapter 12, the Supreme Lord makes it very clear that he himself wants the devotees to be focused on his personal form. So similarly, again, this is related to the concept of realization of the absolute truth. So the Supreme Lord has also made it very clear that the Bhagavan feature is the topmost feature in realization of the absolute truth. So even towards the end of the Gita, he has emphasized it about in the sequence of verses from 18.50 to 18.65. So that is what the Supreme Lord himself wants from us. He has he has made it very clear in the Gita about what he is expecting from us, and he has also given the instructions about how we can do it. Ananya Chetra Satatam Yomam Smarti Nityasah Tasyam Sulava Partha Nitya Yuktasya Yoginaha. For one who remembers me without deviation, I am easy to obtain, O son of Pritha, because of his constant engagement in devotional service. So apart from this verse, also from 8.5 to 8.8, the Supreme Lord emphasizes on the importance of always remembering him, because in order to attain the spiritual world, we have to remember the Supreme Lord at the time of death. But how can we remember him at the time of death if we do not practice remembering him throughout our life? So in 8.5, he says, those who remember me at the time of death, they can attain me. But just in case that people do not misunderstand that verse, so he further clarifies in 8.7, Tasmat Sarveshu Kaleshu Mam Anusmarayudyacha, Mai Arpita Manobutir Mame Vaishasya Samshaya. So in 8.7, he makes it very clear when he says, therefore always remember me and do your duty. So though remembering the Supreme Lord at the time of death is the ideal condition for us to attain the spiritual world, but it doesn't mean that we just have to remember him just have to try to remember him at the time of death and be engaged in all sorts of nonsense throughout our life. So even to dispel that misunderstanding, the Supreme Lord has made it very clear in 8.7 that it is also important for us to practice remembering him throughout our lifetime so that we can remember him at the time of death. Those who are satisfied with temporary life, temporary pleasure, and temporary facilities are not to be considered intelligent, at least not according to the Bhagavad Gita. According to the Gita, one whose brain substance is very small is interested in temporary things. We are eternal, so why should we be interested in temporary things? So this is the main problem uh, of the conditioned souls. We who are eternal spirit souls, we are deluded by this material conditioning to the point where we think that material things could actually satisfy us. And as a result, we always remain unsatisfied. So this topic has also been is also covered in the Katha Upanishad under the section of Radha Kalpana, or the chariot metaphor. So in the chariot metaphor, there's this description about how the horses are regarded as the senses, and the reins are regarded as the mind. The charioteer is intelligence, and the passenger of the chariot is the spirit soul. So when the horses or the senses keep running after sense objects, the mind loses control, because when the horses run wild, the rein cannot be controlled, meaning the mind cannot be controlled by the intelligence, that is the charioteer. So as a result, when the chariot gets destroyed, the passenger, who is the spirit soul, he is also led to permanent destruction. So that is the description from the Katha Upanishad. But there's also another pair of verses from the Gita in chapter 2, in 2.62 and 2.63. In 2.62, the Supreme Lord says, Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsam Sangateshu Pajayate Sangat Sanjayate Kamat Kamakrodo Abhijayate. Then 2.63, Krodhat Bhavati Sammoha Sammohat Smriti Viprama Smriti Vipramshat Buddhi Nasho Buddhi Nashat Pranasyati. Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsam, when the mind contemplates on sense objects, Sangateshu Pajayate, that contemplation on sense objects, it leads to attachment. Sangat Sangat Sanjayate Kamat, that attachment leads to desires. Kama Krodho Abhijayate, when the desire is unfulfilled, anger arises. So that is from 2.62. 2.63, Krodhat Bhavati Samoha, from anger it leads to bewilderment. Sammoha Smriti Viprama, then it leads to disruption of memory. Smriti Brahmshat Buddhi Nasho, the disruption of memory leads to the destruction of intelligence. Buddhi nashat pranashati. When intelligence is destroyed, it leads to complete destruction, total destruction of the spirit soul. So we have been subject to this endless cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease, and that itself shows how we have been subject to this total destruction, the complete fall down as a result of this conditioning. So as long as we fail to realize our original identity as spirit souls, we are likely to be continue to be deluded into thinking that the temporary material objects could give us complete satisfaction. But it will never happen, because the eternal spirit soul can never be satisfied by temporary material things or the sense objects. So due to this deluded condition, no one wants a non-permanent situation. If we are living in an apartment and the landlord asks us to vacate, we are sorry, but we are not sorry if we move into a better apartment. It is our nature, because we are permanent, to want a permanent residence. We don't wish to die, because in actuality we are permanent. Nor do we want to grow old or be diseased, because these are all external or non-permanent states. Although we are not meant to suffer from fever, sometimes fever comes and we have to take precautions and remedies to get well again. The fourfold miseries are like a fever, and they are all due to the material body. If somehow we can get out of the material body, we can escape the miseries that are integral with it. So as long as we are obsessed with all sorts of material designations, as long as we try to act like intellectuals and deny the existence of God, and we try to belittle spirituality. So those who try to belittle spirituality, uh, of course, they themselves are refusing to realize that they are spirit souls. So they will always be caught in an eternal identity crisis. So since they are not able to identify their original identity, so they will keep suffering, but their condition is such that they do not even know that they are suffering, and they will only keep mocking others who are actually trying to look for permanent solutions. But as for those for such conditioned souls who are in that level of deluded condition, so um, there's also another analogy, like how the goats which are brought to the slaughterhouse will be well fed without letting them know that they are going to be slaughtered. So due to this material sense enjoyment, the bewildered spirit souls tend to think that they are actually enjoying, but they their deluded condition is such that they do not even realize the sufferings that come with it. So the only way to escape these miseries is to completely liberate our embodied soul. As long as the soul remains embodied within this temporary material body, there is no escape from this four problems of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. Only by liberating the spirit soul from this material body, we can find permanent solutions. Otherwise, if we waste this precious opportunity, we are only going to end up in another material body, and the cycle starts again. For the impersonalists to get out of this temporary body, Krishna here advises that they vibrate the syllable Om. In this way, they can be assured of transmigration into the spiritual world. However, although they may enter the spiritual world, they cannot enter into any of the planets there. They remain outside in the Brahmajyoti. The Brahmajyoti may be compared to the sunshine, and the spiritual planets may be compared to the sun itself. So again, this is related to the three levels of realization of the absolute truth. From verse 2.2 in the Bhagavad Gita, so that is the first verse spoken by the Supreme Lord. It starts with Sri Bhagavan Vacha. So in the purport to that verse, Srila Prabhupada actually explains the meaning of the word Bhagavan. In the first half of the purport, he explains the meaning of Bhagavan based on the uh, levels of realization of the absolute truth. Then in the second half of the purport, he explains regarding the meaning of the word Bhagavan based on the six opulences defined by Parashara Muni. So in that first half of the purport, also Srila Prabhupada gives this analogy about how the impersonal Brahman realization is related to being able to see the sunshine. Then those who attain the Paramatma realization, they are able to actually see the disk which surrounds the surface of the sun. But those who have attained Bhagavan realization, they are actually able to see the sun god who resides within the sun planet. So this analogy is also given to explain the three levels of realization of the absolute truth. So the impersonalists who are uh, focused only on attaining the Brahmajyoti, so they will end up within the Brahmajyoti, which is not really a destination, because it is just the effulgence which emanates from the body of the Supreme Lord, though it is still part of the spiritual world, but it does not give them any place of residence. In the spiritual sky, the impersonalists remain in the effulgence of the Supreme Lord, the Brahmajyoti. The impersonalists are placed in the Brahmajyoti as spiritual sparks, and in this way, the Brahmajyoti is filled with spiritual sparks. This is what is meant by merging into the spiritual existence. It should not be considered that one merges into the Brahmajyoti in the sense of becoming one with it. The individuality of the spiritual spark is retained, but because the impersonalist does not want to take a personal form, he is found as a spiritual spark in that effulgence. Just as the sunshine is composed of so many atomic particles, so the Brahmajyoti is composed of so many spiritual sparks. So again, even for those impersonalists who talk about merging into the Brahmajyoti, still they do not really get to merge into the Jyoti, because even within the Jyoti itself, they still remain as individual sparks or particles. So there is no concept of oneness or merging. So even when we talk about, even if we accept the this concept of merging into the Brahmajyoti, uh, still the Supreme Lord himself has made it very clear that his Bhagavan feature is the basis for this impersonal Brahmajyoti. That's what he says in the last verse of chapter 14. So this impersonal Brahmajyoti is just a partial feature which emanates from the body of uh, Bhagavan, who represents the topmost level of realization of the absolute truth. So merely aiming for the Brahmajyoti, of course, the Supreme Lord also says in 4.11, ye etamam prapatyanti, tam sataiva bhajamayam, mama valtmanu valtanti, manushya pata sarvasa. So in that verse, he says that as people worship me differently, I reward them accordingly. So even those who aim for the Brahmajyoti, they do get their place within the Brahmajyoti, but uh, still there is no concept of oneness, because even within the Brahmajyoti, they will exist as individual particles. However, as living entities, we want enjoyment. Being in itself is not enough. We want bliss, ananda, as well as being sat. So, by nature, as the eternal spirit souls, we are sat eternal, but we are not in the condition of bliss, because in this Dukalayam, it is always full of dualities. We always experience various dualities like profit, loss, success, failure, happiness, distress. So, happiness is only one part of the duality. So, we have to experience both. Uh, while being in this material world, we will be experiencing happiness for a while, followed by distress, then again happiness, then distress. So, as long as we are trapped in this material world, there's no way of escaping from these dualities. But we can attain eternal bliss once we uh, attain the spiritual world. In its entirety, the living entity is composed of three qualities: eternity, knowledge, bliss, Satchitananda. Those who enter impersonally into the Brahmajyoti can remain there for some time in full knowledge that they are now merged homogeneously with Brahman. But they cannot have that eternal Ananda bliss, because that part is wanting. One may remain alone in a room for some time and may enjoy himself by reading a book or engaging in some thought. But it is not possible to remain in that room for years and years at a time, and certainly not for all eternity. Therefore, for one who merges impersonally into the existence of the Supreme, there is every chance of falling down again into the material world in order to acquire some association. This is the verdict of Srimad Bhagavatam. So, compared to the impersonalists, their biggest problem is that they are completely missing the point, that uh, they are uh, they are missing the opportunity to be engaged in the association of the Supreme Lord. When they refuse to accept the personal feature of the Supreme Lord, when they only aim for the impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord, that they will not get the chance to be engaged in his association. Unlike the personalists who worship the personal feature of the Supreme Lord, who worship the topmost Bhagavan feature, uh, the personalists aim for uh, eternal association with the Supreme Lord. And therefore, upon reaching Krishna Loka, the devotees or the personalists will enjoy uh, the eternal association with the Supreme Lord, and they can remain engaged uh, in serving the Supreme Lord in his eternal pastimes. Unlike the impersonalists, since they themselves have chosen to deny the personal feature of the Supreme Lord, and since they themselves only wanted to merge into this Jyoti, so they will have to remain there without any association. And therefore, there's always the risk of falling down to the material world due to their want uh, of wanting to acquire some association. Astronauts may travel thousands and thousands of miles, but if they do not find rest on some planet, they have to return again to Earth. In any case, rest is required. In the impersonal form, rest is uncertain. Therefore, Srimad Bhagavatam says that even after so much endeavor, if the impersonalist enters into the spiritual world and acquires an impersonal form, he returns again into the material world because of neglecting to serve the Supreme Lord in love and devotion. If we do not even accept the personal feature of the Supreme Lord, which is his original topmost feature, then how can we even serve him in love and devotion? So this is the biggest problem with the impersonalists. They they have some sort of spiritual goal, but they do not really have any goal at all. They want to make some spiritual progress, but they are completely misguided without any proper goal. As long as we are here on earth, we must learn to practice to love and serve Krishna, the Supreme Lord. If we learn this, we can enter into those spiritual planets. The impersonalist position in the spiritual world is non-permanent. For out of loneliness, he will attempt to acquire some association. Because he does not associate personally with the Supreme Lord, he has to return again to the world and associate with conditioned living entities there. So those who are aiming to simply merge into the Brahmajyoti, for them it is even better if they do not even attempt to attain that sort of destination, because somehow due to the absence of any association in the spiritual world, they are likely to fall down again to the material world. So might as well, uh, uh, it is better not to waste time uh, by venturing into such misguided uh, spiritual goals. Mm, okay, so we'll continue with the remaining part next week. Uh, Thank you. Any questions or comments? Mm, okay, thank you. Hare Krishna.